Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Troy Baker. I'm the director of the Better Business Bureau Educational Foundation. I'm happy to be joined today by Detective Sergeant Matt Mcclellan, Kyle Coonan, and Kim Slager, who's from BHS, Mercantile Bank, and the Michigan State Police. They're here to talk about cybersecurity today and how it pertains to your small business. As we know, technology can be great for our businesses, but it can also open up huge risks and threats. So I'm grateful for all of them to join us today and talk about some of those risks and some of the things that you can do to protect your business. And we'll have time for questions as well here to get some of your questions answered. A little bit of housekeeping as we go through this. Everybody is muted, so we'll keep it that way. If you have questions, please type them into the questions section on that panel that's on your screen. There's a little drop down for questions there. We will get to questions at the end of the webinar. And this is being recorded, so we will share this out to everybody at the end when everything's said and done. We'll also have it on our YouTube channel for people to find. So thank you everybody for joining us here today. I'm going to start with Detective Sergeant Matt Mcclellan of Michigan State Police. He's going to talk to us a little bit about what some of the threats are right now and what we're seeing. So, Matt, you should have control.
Thank you, Troy. Okay, good morning, everybody. As Troy said, my name is Matt Mcclellan. I am a Detective Sergeant with the Michigan State Police Michigan Cyber Command Center. I'm going to be speaking to you guys briefly on current trends and threats that we are seeing at the Michigan Cyber Command Center. And then after Kyle and Kim speak, I'm going to come back and speak to you guys again briefly on MC3 response. What we would do if we did respond to an incident that you reported, as well as some additional resources that we can provide to you guys. My contact information is listed here. I apologize, that email address is blue. That email address is mc3@michigan.gov. And there's a phone number for us and also our website. You can utilize either that email address or phone number to contact myself if you have any follow-up questions, or if you need to report an incident in the future. And I will also have this up again at the end of the presentation. Okay, so just a little bit about the Michigan Cyber Command Center, part of the Michigan State Police. What exactly does my unit do? We investigate network intrusion related incidents, and we conduct forensics on those types of incidents. Network intrusions could be anything hacking, account compromise, cybersecurity related. Anytime there's a breach, we investigate incidents on the dark web where a lot of illicit and illegal activity is occurring, and a lot of things, illegal things are being sold and traded on the dark web. We conduct cybersecurity assessments for various businesses and organizations across Michigan, where we come in, assess a organization's network, tell you what you're doing well, tell you some things you might be able to improve on, and that sort of thing. We do threat analysis and info sharing. That's especially big right now. For example, during this whole Russia-Ukraine crisis, there's a whole lot of information coming out from our federal partners that we then share with our contacts, and vice versa. We're intaking information and sharing that information back out as well. And then we do training and outreach, very similar to what we are doing here today, for various public and private sectors and critical infrastructure entities. Regarding current trends and threats that we are currently seeing, I broke it down into two parts, external and internal. For external trends and threats that we are seeing, ransomware is a huge one. We have something called business email compromises. And then under the other section, other types of malware, payroll and gift card scams, and that could also include various cryptocurrency scams as well. And for internal, we have insider threats and rogue employees. And on the next slides, I'm going to dive deeper into each one of these to give you guys some more detail on what these contain. Okay, so starting off with ransomware. What is ransomware? Ransomware is malware designed to encrypt files. Once your files are encrypted, your files are totally useless, and the malicious actors then demand a ransom in exchange for decryption of your files so you can use them again. This usually starts off with, let's say an employee comes back after a long weekend, they're the first in the office, they sign on, they sign on onto their computer and realize that none of their files are opening up, they can't open up anything or connect to anything, and all of a sudden they might stumble across a ransom note in a notepad, PDF document, whatever it might be, that says, hey, we're bad guys, we encrypted your files, if you want to use these files again, pay us this ransom amount via this type of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, whatever it might be. Here's some instructions on how to do that. You know, visit us at this dark web website for more details about how to do that. And then not only do the bad guys do that nowadays, aside from encrypting your files, right before they encrypt your files, they also exfiltrate your data, your company's data out, and threaten to post that data or leak that data online if you don't pay that ransom. We saw that over the last year, more and more ransomware groups started doing that because more and more companies started keeping backups. So if your computer network did get hit, companies were able to restore from backups, they were good to go. The bad guys said, whoa, wait a minute, not so easy. We also stole your data and we're gonna leak this unless you pay us that ransom that we asked. So it's kind of like a double extortion method right there. Moving on from ransomware, we have business email compromises. This is where a bad actor gains access to a company email account and then utilizes that email account to commit fraud. Usually once they're inside that email account, they conduct reconnaissance to see if there's any upcoming transactions, invoices that are supposed to be paid soon. They look at who that company or who that employee is doing business with, and then they will impersonate that employee and send emails back and forth saying, hey, I see you guys owe us this $40,000. Here's a reminder, here's that invoice. Oh, by the way, we also changed bank accounts. Please send us that money to this new bank account. All of a sudden that other company is now sending that $40,000 to a fraudulent bank account that is controlled by the bad actor. On top of that, keep in mind, email, we use it for everything these days. There's a lot of sensitive data that's contained in those email accounts that are usually viewed, accessed, or stolen as well. Sensitive information pertaining to your clients or your employees or whatever else your company might do that's important to you. Other trends that we are seeing, payroll and direct deposit scams. This is where a bad actor impersonates a company employee and sends an email to the company HR or the company payroll coordinator requesting that an employee's direct deposit bank account info be changed. And all of a sudden, you know, the next few payroll deposits might get sent into this fraudulent bank account, and one or two might go by before the employee realizes they're not getting paid and they say something. Gift card scams. This is where a bad actor impersonates usually a company executive and asks an employee to purchase gift cards for them and then send them photos of gift cards. Usually this is done by email or by text message, but it's something like, hey, I need you to do me a favor. I don't have access to my phone right now. Let's communicate over email only. I'm at this event. We're giving out these gift cards for a raffle that we're doing. Can you please go buy these Google Play cards or Apple Store cards and then scratch them off and send me the codes and that kind of stuff. Other malware, there's been certain instances where someone clicks on a bad link or an attachment, some kind of bad malware downloads to their system, and then, you know, it's looks at all their email contacts, spreads through email, and all of a sudden, all these employees at all these different organizations are downloading this bad, malicious malware, which then down the road, if it's not cleaned up, can usually lead to ransomware or business email compromises or stolen data, credentials, banking credentials, and so on. And the one that's not listed here would be any sort of cryptocurrency scam. Bad guys like to take control of computers and use those computers to mine cryptocurrency. Yeah, one computer might not be able to mine a lot, but when they're combining that together with thousands of other computers, they're able to mine a good load of cryptocurrency. On top of that, just the typical cryptocurrency investment scams. Hey, invest this much, you get this much back, or hey, you won a lottery, we're going to give you this much, but first you have to pay this small processing fee. So all things to look out for and consider in scams these days. Okay, so how do each of these occur? Each of these external threats occur. They could occur from phishing emails that contain bad links or attachments. They could occur due to remote desktop protocol being accessible to the public-facing internet, not behind a VPN connection, where the bad guys are able to guess a password. Maybe they obtained it from a previous data breach, or your password's easy and they're able to brute force that password. It could happen from a hardware or software that has been left unpatched where a vulnerability is exploited. Any of these instances could occur from poor password security in general on your email account or whatever it might be, where if you reuse passwords and that password was obtained during a data breach, or if you have a weak password or two-factor or multi-factor authentication is not utilized. Social engineering is a big one, where somebody could impersonate you, call up your company IT help desk and get your security questions reset, something like that. And or if you have poor policies and procedures in place, or if you have good policies and procedures in place, but those aren't being followed. Something like, hey, anytime someone's requesting to change their direct deposit payroll, call that person via a known number and confirm with them. If something like that's not being followed, then fraud could happen a lot easier that way. Moving on from external to internal threats, we have insider employee threats and rogue employees. This is usually with current employees who are disgruntled or former employees who have left and are disgruntled. Some instances that we have seen have been current or former employees stealing data, current or former employees locking out other employees or their company or ex-company from a certain system, gaining unauthorized access to something, accessing something that they weren't supposed to access or allowed to access, and destruction of data, which could include defacement, something like defacing the website and displaying some kind of graphic image or language. These are all examples of cases that we have seen from employees inside companies who are still there and disgruntled or who had recently left. How do these occur? They could occur due to poor auditing and management of access, of employee access permissions. For example, does an employee have too much access to things that they don't need access for versus where they should just have access to things that they need to do their job and nothing more? Or if you leave one employee in charge of total control of critical services and something happens to that employee, they become disgruntled and they leave, or even if that employee were to get hurt, all of a sudden you have that one employee with keys to the kingdom, and now all of a sudden you don't have those keys to the kingdom anymore because you don't have that employee anymore. So sharing those access and permissions out is critical as well. Could also happen by not keeping a list of accounts, which employee has access to. So if an employee were to leave, do you have a list of accounts that this employee had? And then do you also have a process in place to make sure you automatically revoke those accounts immediately upon them resigning or them being terminated, so they can't go in later and sign into some account that you didn't take away from them? And then lastly, they could also occur from not training employees how to recognize and report suspicious activity of other employees that they see or observe them doing something wrong, but they might not be able to recognize it, or they might not know how to properly report that. And I think that's it for me for now. I will be back after Kyle and Kim speak, but again, here's my contact information right here. That email address is a little dark. Again, it's mc3@michigan.gov. And thank you very much, and I will see you guys afterwards. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Kyle, I've handed control over to you. You should be able to step into taking a look at some of the things businesses should know about cybersecurity and steps they can take.
Yeah, thanks. And just doing a quick sound check. Give me a thumbs up if everything's good. All right, thank you. So yeah, I'm just going to piggyback off from what Detective Sergeant Mcclellan, sorry, was just talking about. And so you're gonna hear some of this stuff probably twice, but that's okay. And maybe I'll just give it a little different twist than what he did. But you know, as I was thinking about what to provide to you all today, the two concerns from my perspective as the information security officer at Mercantile Bank, my concerns for our customers and ourselves are these two things here, which you already heard a little bit about in the previous speaker talking about ransomware in the fraudulent email communications. He dubbed it as business email compromise. But I'm going to dig into those a little bit more as well as he did. But here were some definitions that I threw out there. But you probably have a pretty good understanding of that from his talk. So, you know, what does this screen here really try to indicate? And it's really, these two threats have one common theme that is in common, and that is email. The criminals are out there trying to get at your data, trying to get at your passwords, trying to get whatever they can that ultimately ends up getting them money, because that's their end goal for most criminals these days. And you know, we put a lot of defenses at times in, and sometimes there's no need for them to break down our cybersecurity's front door when our employees are conveniently sometimes simply opening the door for them. And so we'll dive into that a little bit more here on the next slide. So, you know, thinking about the low-hanging fruit in maybe businesses that don't have a lot of funds to be able to spend on cybersecurity, and you know, go out there and there's tons of tools and necessarily know where to start. And so that's my attempt here, is just to try to walk through this list and give you some examples of things that you can do. And you know, I classified these as low-hanging fruit. So number one, and it is number one on my list for a reason, you heard Detective Sergeant Mcclellan talk about this, is multi-factor authentication. And you need to have multi-factor authentication enabled for anything that you're accessing that's accessible to the internet. So for example, Office 365, G Suite, Outlook Web Access, if your company's using that. If you have a VPN access into your business's network, all those should have multi-factor authentication. And you know, multi-factor authentication is just a quick example, is something more. I listed some types of companies there that offer it: Duo, Google Authenticator, Okta, so on. But it's your user ID, your password, and then some other code that you get. I've got this wonderful thing on my desk here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but some of you might recognize this piece of technology. It's called an RSA token. So a little number would show up on here, and you'd use that as that additional factor for multi-factor authentication. Nowadays, you get that as a text to your phone, and it's, you know, 5 or 6 or maybe sometimes longer digits, and you throw that in there in addition to your user ID and password. And that is so important this day and age, because, you know, as talked about through phishing exercises, again, back to the email, criminals have gotten really good at knowing how we use email to do business. And as in the example of Office 365, how many times have you received an email where you needed to click a link and it essentially brought you to a screen where you needed to log in because somebody was sending you an attachment? It looks exactly like an Office 365 page. You put your credentials in there, but it really wasn't Office 365. It was a lookalike page that the criminals basically now just scraped that information that you put into that, and now they have your user ID and password. If you have multi-factor authentication turned on for your solution, then them stealing just those credentials isn't enough. And Officer Mcclellan talked about you know, there's other ways through lists and stuff. People use the same password over and over again and so on. So there's a lot of different ways that the criminals, but a lot of times they dupe it right out of you. So multi-factor authentication, I can't say enough about how critical that is for systems these days, because criminals can access Office 365 or G Suite anywhere in the world. So if they've got your credentials and that's all you're using to secure your information, they're now into your email. And so why is that important? You know, we talked about that from a payments processing, and I apologize, I'm jumping to number 3 here. But one thing we see in the banking industry is often how our business customers are sending ACHs or wires, and they think they're doing the right thing. They've received this email communication that said, hey, we changed bank account numbers. You know, please change it before you send us this invoice, you know, pay this invoice. And unfortunately, quite often how that story ends is with the true vendor contacting our customer and saying, hey, you still owe us for XYZ invoice for, let's just say, $100,000. And they're like, no, we paid you. And then that invokes the investigation, and come to find out they have received that fraudulent email because somebody's email was compromised. Maybe that vendor's email was compromised. It could be, we've seen it where the company, our customer's account was compromised, and the criminals used that access to make bogus looking invoices not really coming from that vendor, even though the vendor, you know, they saw that by watching your email and was able to do it that way. So it doesn't always have to be your vendor's account is compromised. I guess the whole point that I want to make here is that you can't trust email anymore, because it literally could be coming from that person's inbox, but it's not them who's authoring that information. And so picking up the phone, as suggested before, is really one of the only ways that I can think of that you can truly validate that the email is legitimate before you click that link, before you open that attachment, or before you take some action based on that email. And it doesn't seem to be very efficient, but if you want to know for sure, and if you're really concerned about it, then that's the way to do it. And I would add, don't just validate that the email is legitimate, because we've seen it where two parties knew that this email with an account number change was coming, and the person said, yep, I just got it. Is this correct? You know, you just sent it. And they said yes. What they didn't do is validate the information within the email. So the criminals still got in the middle of that transaction and had changed the information because they had access within one of those individuals' emails systems. And so take the time to say, okay, if it's changing, what should this email be telling me the correct account number is, or the routing number, you know, all the payment information. So validate that. And you can do that by having a payment processing policy. You know, create some sort of policy for your people who have that role within your organization, that they will follow these steps as mentioned before. And I truly believe that if you have the correct policy in place, where you're going to take those steps to do that verification when the transaction is the most risky, that you will avoid sending money to somebody that you shouldn't, even if it looks like it's totally legit. And, you know, what are those risky times? Riskiest time of payments is the initial setup, because you're getting brand new information and you need to make sure undoubtedly this is where we're going to be sending that money electronically, and that's all correct. So, you know, again, verifying with the phone call and all that, I think, is a great step there. Number two would be, you've been paying this vendor or this individual for years using the current payment information, and all of a sudden you get this request for change. That's the second most riskiest time, I would say, of any type of payment processing. And you need to pick up the phone and make sure that all the information that you received is not only legitimate, but that it's correct before you go and make those changes. Just do not trust the email. And mentioned before, you know, if you have internal processes that email starts it, like, hey, I'm changing my, payroll direct deposit, any of those types of things. And that's focused on payment processing, but think maybe beyond just payment processing of, what other things that you have. Are you going to ship material based on simply an email? Think about the risk that you're taking maybe throughout your organization in certain other situations where the email starts and stops. Is the beginning and the end of that, and is that okay? So I'll just pause there and let you think about that a little bit. So then that goes to, I'm going to jump back up to number 2 now, and that is this whole training and creating what I would call a security-minded culture within your organization. And how do you do that? And you do that a lot with training. So security awareness training is key, in that you do that on a regular basis. Annually is at a minimum. Some people will do something every month that has to do with security awareness, and require their people to go through that particular module, and then complete some questions to verify that they were paying attention and not just simply next, or watching a video and not really gaining any information from that. Phishing simulations, where you actually phish your own people with simulations, just like what the bad guys are sending. But these are meant to be training exercises to get people used to reporting something that they believe is fishy, or at least recognizing the things about the email that makes them concerned, and get them thinking about not trusting the email initially, scrutinize it, and then determine whether or not to take the next steps. And then email reminders using current events, that I think was brought up before too. Anytime there's a new current event kind of thing, right now the conflict over with the Russian Ukrainians is creating, a lot of noise and a lot of opportunities that the adversaries will try to take advantage of. So again, using those as opportunities to remind people to do the right thing when they're utilizing their email. Oops, sorry. Number 4, just a real easy one, but a lot of smaller organizations don't realize necessarily that when you set up a user account on your computers, make sure that it's not also a member of the local admin. This used to be the case years and years ago because it made it easier to install software and all that kind of thing, and now it's the bad guys have taken advantage of that situation, and it's easy for them to install their malware and things of that nature, and it really sets them up. If they can compromise your account and you're a local admin, you've got privileged access that you probably don't even realize what that all can do, and it really opens a lot of doors up for them. So make sure within your organization that your user account is just a normal user account. It doesn't have to have any local admin privilege. That should be reserved for the folks who are your true admins, your domain admins that are helping you install software and do things on your computer. So just that's a quick fix if you can do that. And then I just shared an example of a banner that we have. So sometimes the bad guys try to spoof your email, and it's actually coming from an external source. So as you can see on the subject line there, we've got a little tag that says, hey, this is external. Then we have this wonderful big yellow banner that also reminds people of the attachments and things of the links to not, just simply do that. If it's an unsolicited email, don't click on those, open those. And it also gives you the ability to see if you were to reply to this email, who would it go back to? And sometimes that's kind of tricky because it comes from, mailing services and things like that. So that doesn't always match up. But if you're having a conversation with your insurance agent or something like that, and it's going to be coming from their business, it should say their email there. So these are some things that you might want to look into to see if your mail provider, has some tools that can help you do some of these same sort of things, because then you can train your people to, review these, think about these. It's in their face to say that this email is trying to act like our CEO, but it's coming from an external, it says it's coming from an external system. It's not within our four walls, but it's trying to make it seem like it is. And, that should be a red flag right there. So some things to think about and implement there. And then these here, 3, I kind of divide these into a little more effort that you're going to need to invoke. And again, on the ransomware protection front, we talked about, backups is really the key. Making sure that you do have a copy, not just that you're doing backups, but that you have one that is kind of kept offline that the adversary can't get to, because they've also figured out how to encrypt the backups before they encrypt the network so that you don't have that. So you want to have a protected copy. And then I would add to, from that ransomware and any other malware is number 2, you need to make sure you're keeping your systems up to date, patching them on a regular basis, whether that's your Microsoft operating system, the operating systems on your mobile devices, whether that's a Android or an Apple product, software, other types of Microsoft software. If you're using, Microsoft suite of information that's on your local machine, if you're not in Office 365, or you're using, you can put that software directly on your computer. So make sure whoever's in charge of that you're keeping all your systems updated with patches. That includes your firewalls, your wireless instruments. There's just about anything that's electronic these days has the need to be patched on a regular basis. So make sure you're doing that as well. And then lastly, to help you with understanding how well you're doing on all these fronts would be to consider hiring a third party to come in and do a security assessment of your organization. These are great opportunities and tools to help assess based on what the industry best standard is towards what you're doing, and see where there's maybe some gaps and where you can make some improvements. And a third party independent group can come in and really assist you with doing some of that assessing. And then on the last slide here is just simply some of those resources. Some are free, some are not, especially when it comes to like your online training or your proof point. KnowBe4 are great for that online training, phishing kind of stuff, but you're going to end up paying for those. But like the first 2, SANS.org, go visit that, check out the Ouch newsletter. That's something that's free out there. You can, forward that to your staff, make available on your intranet. And there's a lot of great content that they have on a monthly basis. A new one comes out, and you can go to some of the old material that's there too and find something that might be prevalent and make good sense to send out on that particular month. And then just some other organizations that are really good for doing some of those third-party assessments for you. And last but not least, NIST is just a framework, and sometimes you'll start to hear, and I'm getting kind of deep now, but where the framework is, here's the standard, and then you can start to try to use those standards to help improve your security posture within your organization. But if I'm going to leave you with 1 or 2 things, I really would recommend that you multi-factor authentication, use that wherever you can. And number 2, make sure you've got clear-cut processes and that everybody's trained on how you are going to do your payment processing, because there's nothing worse than sending money somewhere, authorizing your bank to do that, and then later finding out that the email communication you got was the fraudulent piece. So you just sent legitimate money, and there was nothing anybody could do because you thought you were doing the right thing. Let's get those policies in place to make sure that doesn't happen going forward, because you can stop that. I really believe you can with the right steps and procedures and having trained people. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Kyle. Kim, I'm going to hand things over to you now. And we're going to talk about how this can affect your insurance and ways that you can insure yourself.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so certainly cyber insurance has evolved over the last couple of years with the increased claims activity and the unsustainable nature in which this ball is rolling. Many of our insurance carriers are asking far more detailed questions than we ever used to. Back in the day, it was a one-page application. It was pretty short and sweet, and the level of sophistication on those questions was very low. Now we have the opposite of that, and most of that came from this creation of a group in the spring of last year called Cyber AccuView. The top 7 insurance carriers for cyber insurance got together and said, this is unsustainable. What can we learn from each other? How can we stop the bleeding? How do we educate our clients better? And how do we make this a sustainable product? And then born out of that became the requirements of multi-factor authentication. I'm told back when seatbelts were not a thing, the insurance industry really pushed the car makers to have seatbelts. MFA is a seatbelt for cyber. You've heard it now from Matt and Kyle both, and it's just extremely important that you have multi-factor authentication. So those requirements started last year, and we're continuing to see that implemented across the board with all insurance carriers for cyber. Again, the sophistication on the applications, it is not a CFO or business owner's sole job to complete those applications. They really need to be done with your IT team, whether that's internal or an external third party. These are what they call warranty applications, which means if you're answering those questions as yes or no, and it's not the right answer. Yes, we have MFA on email and remote access and privileged user, and we don't have that, you will have a claim denied by your insurance carrier because you attested to that being in place when it wasn't. Understand too that applications are not standardized in our industry. Cyber insurance is all over the map, so it's really important that you're picking the right partner to help you navigate those waters. The other thing that the insurance carriers are using is third-party scans. So the same way in which the bad actors are looking at your systems for vulnerabilities, the insurance carriers are doing that same sort of methodology to be proactive, to identify what can we see on your website, what can we understand as far as domain vulnerabilities, etc. So they're using third-party vendors such as BitSite and some other carriers to come back with underwriting detail that you may not even know, but those are great opportunities for you to take and embrace and fix moving forward because, again, you're reducing your risk by taking that information and doing something with it. The carriers are also providing third-party alerts. So when the Apache Log4j happened, we were getting alerts within hours of that vulnerability being launched. And so they're trying to be more proactive in that way as well. And then just overall, especially with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, the worldwide exposure for zero-day events, which just basically means it can affect a whole lot of people all at one time, and in trying to manage through that even more effectively. So, I clicked one too fast. How am I going to get it back? Hold on. There we are. The key measures, you've heard these already. Multi-factor has to be in place for email, remote access, and privileged user access. So as Kyle was mentioning about making sure that not everybody has privileged user access within your organization, not only that, but when we do give privileged user access, that your IT team is notified if someone's trying to elevate themselves within the system. That's exactly what happened with the pipeline situation. Somebody bought a password for $1 on the black web. They got into somebody's system and then they elevated themselves within it. Had MFA been implemented on privileged user access, that IT team would have been alerted potentially to somebody trying to elevate themselves within the system. Training, KnowBe4 is a very popular one, has to be done annually. Phish simulation has to be done at least quarterly. Patch protocol, making sure that you have a certain cadence to it and that any critical patches are implemented within 2 weeks. Retiring end-of-life software, which just basically means, hey, if it's not being supported by the manufacturer anymore, you need to sunset that and get that out of your system. Because if new vulnerabilities are created, they're not going to have patches to fix that. You need to make sure that all emails are being scanned for malicious attachments and links. and that you're also using endpoint detection software. This is new in the marketplace, and it's being a requirement to qualify for cyber insurance as well. We talked about backups, but making sure that those backups are separate from the enterprise environment so they can't be compromised as well. Again, that local admin rights, narrowing that down to the people who it should be. Encrypting our data in transit at rest, including backups and laptops. And then working with your providers to have a formal incident response plan. These cyber insurance carriers do have some templates out there that can help you kind of launch this, but if you're doing like a third-party vulnerability scan or a third-party assessment, they will also help you with that incident response plan as well. So what is cyber insurance? Cyber insurance can be purchased in one of two ways, and the best way to do that is to make sure you have a standalone cyber insurance policy. You're cutting a check for a separate policy that is cyber on its own versus adding it onto your current package policy. So a lot of your small business owners' policies may have a little bit of coverage there. Generally, those limits are no higher than $100,000 limits versus a standalone cyber insurance policy, which would be at least $1 million of coverage for a cyber. It's much more broad in the coverages that you're going to be purchasing, as well as a better way to protect your organization. So what is included? You have first-party coverages. That means checks being written to you in the event of a breach. The best thing about these policies is a breach response coach. You have the bad day and you don't know who to call to help you. You call that 1-800 number, that's the breach coach, and they walk you through what happened, what occurred, do we have a data breach, what next steps do we need to take. Generally speaking, those are staffed by attorneys that only handle cyber breach response, and generally they're handling multitudes of these sorts of events. The other components would be again, the legal support that you need. The legal department, once a legal counsel is assigned, then they're going to assign a forensic investigation. That forensic investigation is going to flow through legal so that there's always attorney-client privilege. The forensics will help us understand how did they get in, what did they have access to, and now what do we have to do from a notification perspective. Meanwhile, if your systems are all shut down, you can't take credit card transactions, you can't use your point of sale, you're unable to operate your business, the first party coverage will include loss of business interruption. Huge component of cyber insurance and only really a part of a standalone product. The other component is contingent business income. So a third party vendor we rely on to operate our business and to function, they're compromised, shutting us down. That contingent business interruption is part of a cyber insurance policy or a good insurance policy. The cost to notify, so now we have a obligation, and the way that the federal law works is if you originated the information, you are the one that's responsible for notifying. So if it's your customer, they came in, you created that information, or your employee's information that got compromised, you are the one that has to notify, even if it was a third party that was involved in the process. Also, we'll pay for public relations, and the most important part, ransomware, cyber extortion. The insurance policy will respond in paying, if that's the appropriate thing, the cyber extortion. And that's where that legal counsel and that breach coach is going to come into play to help us identify what do we have. Do we have backups that we can use? Do we think that they breached our private information or not? And those are careful discussions that need to be discussed. And also digital data recovery. So just helping you recreate the data that you lost if that's the case because your backups were not solid. Those are all part of first party coverages. And then third party would be the liability. So now you're sued because people are upset that their data was stolen. That third party liability would be part of the insurance policy, as well as regulatory fines and penalties. So PCI compliance, GDPR, California has their own laws, Illinois is coming out with their own. All of them have fines and penalties that could be related and would be part of the cyber policy. You can also purchase a couple other what we call cyber crime policies. So you've heard Kyle talk about and Matt talk about being duped into wire transferring money to somebody that you thought you knew, liked, and trust. That social engineering component can be a component of the cyber insurance, also can be part of your crime insurance. It can be purchased both ways. Then as far as trends in the cyber insurance space, we're seeing now with some routineness a exclusion being applied to policies for unpatched software. So basically the insurance carriers are saying, if you don't have a patch policy in place, and you're not patching your system, we're not paying those claims anymore. So look out for those. We try to negotiate those out if they are being applied. Worldwide event supplements. So rather than having that $1 million for your full insurance policy, maybe on those worldwide events, they want to scale that back down and you purchase back up. Co-insurance or reduced limits for ransomware. Again, if you don't have the proper policies and procedures in place, they're going to cap those. And then overall, pricing is going up, retentions are going up, meaning your deductibles are going up. So how do you differentiate yourself as somebody buying this product? You want to remain best in class. You do that by doing all the things that we just talked about. And if you can, and I would be very, I cannot stress and emphasize enough the critical nature of answering those applications to the best of your ability. And if you see things in there that are opening your eyes up to saying, hey, we don't have MFA for VPN, we need to get that implemented. Find out how quickly you can get that done before your cyber insurance renewal comes up. We're working with our clients at least 90, 120 days in advance to make sure if there are protocols that you can work with your IT providers on to be best in class, it should pay for itself when you're going out to the marketplace. And then just basically, you know, our IT folks are working hard and the bad guys are working twice as hard. So, you know, making sure that we're providing a cyber insurance to back up the hard work that your IT team's doing. If you don't have the coverage, I strongly encourage you to be talking to your insurance provider to get you options.
Great. Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. It's fantastic information. I will remind people, if you do have questions, go ahead and type them into the question section there. I'm going to bring Matt back in because he's going to talk about some of the things that they have available for businesses. If you do have an issue, Michigan State Police MC3 can help you out with some of that. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Troy. Okay, so MC3 response, Michigan Cyber Command Center response. What does our response look like? Well, first off, if you guys do experience a cyber incident, if you do fall victim to ransomware, business email compromise, or some other sort of compromise or network intrusion, hacking, data breach, whatever it might be, please contact us at this phone number or this email address here and make a report. We understand that we are one of several agencies that this can be reported to. You also have several other federal agencies that this can be reported to as well, such as the FBI, U.S. Secret Service, Homeland Security Investigations. All are great resources, all are great agencies to report them to. We are the unit within the Michigan State Police that investigate these. So if you would like to, please report them to us at this phone number or this email address. After you report these, we will reach out to you, make contact, and learn more about exactly what happened. And then from there, we may respond in person or virtually, depending on the type of incident and what evidence needs to be collected. Again, we're a law enforcement agency. Our main focus is going to be to investigate the criminal aspect of this, to see if we can identify the suspects behind it, and see if that can ultimately lead to prosecution or whatever it might be. Another good resource is to report this to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center at the website ic3.gov. This is a great central kind of like database or resource for you to insert this information into. It takes just a few minutes, but at the same time, this allows the FBI to kind of compile this central database to where they can say, oh, look, this company, along with 100 other companies, all reported receiving suspicious emails from this email address trying to elicit this kind of scam. That might be able to allow the FBI and their partners to focus more so on this player, as in a big player in the game, if they can see that it's coming back to a number of incidents across the country. But again, if you do report it to us at that number or email address, we will respond either in person or virtually and ask you for evidence that may need to be collected. Now, what can that evidence contain? That evidence could contain any number of the following things listed there. So there's something called memory or RAM, random access memory. This is usually important in ransomware because a lot of ransomware these days is fileless. It all lives within memory, and rarely is it ever stored, is anything malicious ever stored on the hardware regarding ransomware and when it's running on your computer. So we always try to teach folks, if you ever do become victim of ransomware, first train of thought might be to pull the plug, shut everything down, but that's not necessarily true. If the encryption's already done, there's no harm in leaving the computer running as long as you disconnect it from the network. If you disconnect it from the network, that prevents the bad guys from accessing your network remotely and doing something like stealing more data. But at the same time, you're now disconnected from the network, your computer is still up and running, and that allows us to capture this memory. The issue with shutting your computer down is memory is volatile. All of your memory would disappear when you shut the computer down, and therefore, if you start it back up, what we need may no longer be there or will no longer be there. So again, that's why we advocate for keep your computer up and running. That way we can collect this memory, which could have a lot of important information to us, but at the same time, just disconnect from the network so it can't connect outside and someone from the outside can't connect back to you. Aside from memory, we might also collect something called Windows event logs and various other types of logs, depending on what network devices you have. That can contain firewall logs, or if, let's say, for example, it's a business email compromise and then the email account was compromised, we would ask for logs from the Security and Compliance Center from your Office 365 account. We may ask for copies of emails where we would ask you to forward those emails to us as an attachment instead of just forwarding them to us. There's a separate option called forward as an attachment. So then we can get that original email and take a look at some of the technical info called a header on the back end, and we can get some important information from that. Other times, again, in business email compromises, certain or various filters and rules might be found on a compromised email account. So we would ask for you to, if you identified any of those, to please share those with us. That's something as simple as any email that contains the word invoice, please mark as read and move to my RSS feed folder or whatever it might be. So the bad guy who has access to your account, to the compromised account, knows where to find these emails, but at the same time, he has these rules in place so you, the actual user, don't see them coming in and suspect something. And then lastly, hard drives, obviously, that would be something that we may want as well. Everything I listed here at the top can be captured virtually or remotely, where we can send you tools to have you capture memory or Windows event logs, or you can capture the logs yourself or send us emails. Hard drives makes it a little more difficult just because of the size and capacity of those, to where if we did feel that we needed to make forensic images of your hard drives, we'd respond there in person. We have some fancy toolboxes that allow us to hook right up to the hard drives, make a forensic image of that hard drive, and then we leave you with the hard drive so we don't take that hard drive away from you and keep you out of business or whatever it might be for too long. Other considerations to think of, people always ask, like, when should we call you? I always say we should be one of the first people that you call, along with your cyber insurance, your legal counsel. A lot of times your cyber insurance is going to get a third-party forensic response firm working or going there as well. But I can't give you a specific order, just we should be one of the first ones, just like cyber insurance, and your legal counsel should be as well. And I just want to make a note that I feel like we do a real good job of working together with, you know, whoever the third-party forensic response firm is that is hired by the cyber insurance company, or your legal counsel of, you know, the response firm is already looking into this, they're going to produce a report and provide that to us. Or we've collected this evidence, we're going to produce a report and provide it on to the third-party forensic response firm and legal counsel to let them know what we found. So I feel like we do a good job there of, you know, coordinating so steps aren't being completed over and over again, or the same steps aren't being completed over and over again and stuff's being duplicated. I'm going to skip down to the third bullet point for a second. I just want to make a note that info reported to the MC3 related to cybersecurity incidents are exempt from FOIA. FOIA is the Freedom of Information Act. So in Michigan, you know, General Joe Schmo citizen can submit a request through the Freedom of Information Act saying, hey, I want to find, you know, I want this report number, or I want this report, reference this report number and incident. I just want to let you guys know that anything cybersecurity related, related to any cybersecurity incident that you report to us, the MC3, is exempt from the Freedom of Information. So anything related to cybersecurity would be redacted and would not be released. So you don't have to worry about general public, the media, whoever might be obtaining that sensitive information. And lastly, another consideration, usually in the cases of ransomware, we will monitor data posted on the dark web, like monitor for your data posted on the dark web, and advise you if we locate any of your data. A lot of times to go along with that, they post screenshots of what data they're threatening to leak, and they might have like a little countdown timer, and we can share all that information with you. This is my last slide here. Other MC3 resources that we offer. If you go to our website at michigan.gov/MC3, we have various resources, something called cyber snapshots and products, where we post every so often things like this. Here's a cyber snapshot that we did on ransomware protecting your data, to where it's a nice little document that provides more info on ransomware and what you can do to protect against ransomware. And then over on the left-hand side, I copied and pasted out a snippet of some other publications that we did. So you can see ransomware, capturing RAM, password managers, payroll phishing. There's a whole wealth of information there that you guys can refer to learn more about a various topic. Our distribution list, send us an email at mc3@michigan.gov, and we can get you signed up for our distribution list, where anytime we do come out with one of these new products, we'll send it your way, as well as other alerts. If we get an alert from CISA or the FBI saying, hey, here's something new that we're seeing, some new ransomware variant that's affecting the healthcare sector or whatever it might be, we will share that information out. We use a third-party company to a third-party trusted resource to who looks on the web for companies or organizations that might be affected by certain vulnerabilities or CVEs or compromised data, and they'll let us know, and then we'll let you know so you can then fix those. Lastly, we offer cybersecurity awareness training. The most popular one that we offer is kind of like a cybersecurity 101, how to identify phishing email training. It's a 1 hour long training. It's free, and it's meant towards that end user. I think, as Kyle stated, we kind of explained that, hey, an organization can have the best cybersecurity in the world, but all it takes is that one end user to just click on a phishing email or open up an attachment, and all of a sudden the whole network is compromised. So that's kind of what that emphasizes there. It's meant towards the end users who are dealing with money or payroll or whatever it might be. And then lastly, cybersecurity assessments. We do offer free cybersecurity assessments. Again, just giving you an idea of things that you're doing well, things that could probably be improved on. We create a nice little report. It's pretty high level. We don't do any hands-on stuff. We're not doing any pen testing or anything like that. It's mainly just a list of questions that we go through. We gather your answers, and then we produce a report and give you some feedback based off of that. And I think that's it for me. I'll put my contact information up here again at the end. But again, thank you very much. That's it for me. And I think now, Troy, time for questions if there are any.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. And I know to everybody who's on this call, we are getting up against the hour. We do have some questions to go through. If you're interested in hanging on, and again, if you do have questions, we are going to get to them. So feel free to type them in. I guess the first question I would have for people is, for small businesses. I'm an auto repair shop. I got one computer in the office and 3 guys wrenching on cars. What's really my risk? Am I really at risk for this? And I don't know, Matt, go ahead and what's the answer? Is that really a risk for small businesses? Here, I'm not a big business that's really at risk, am I?
I'd say it's still a risk. I mean, it depends on how much you rely on that computer. But if that computer is your main way of managing records, customer records, invoices, whatever it might be, and all of a sudden that computer goes down and all your files are encrypted, and that's what you need day in and day out to manage your client's records and manage the payment info and whatever it might be, then I'd say your risk is pretty big if you depend a lot on that computer with those 3 employees. And that gets into the whole topic of 3 employees are all using the same computer. Are they using shared accounts or different accounts? You know, and then we can talk about a little more about what Kyle said. Do each of them have 2FA turned on for their email accounts? Have they been trained on how to recognize phishing emails and so forth? But I would argue, yes. I mean, it doesn't matter the size of the business, small or large. A lot of us rely on our computers day in and day out, unless you're one of the outcasts and you're still doing everything by paper, and you know, you have a paper ledger and whatever it might be. But I highly doubt that in today's day and age.
All right. I've got a question from somebody here that said they recently had a malware attack where an employee opened a link in an email that looked legit, but the bad actor took control of his email and sent the same email to our employee's contacts. They immediately contacted the email administrator, and he changed email passwords in the company, and our IT company came in and scrubbed the computers and deleted the found malware. Is there anything else they should have considered doing? I don't know, anybody on the group, is there something else they should have considered in that besides getting things scrubbed and changing passwords?
I guess the one thing I would say is, what does scrub mean? I mean, my opinion, anytime something like that happens, a computer should be re-imaged and a fresh, clean installed operating system be installed on there. And then I know they mentioned email. I know they said they changed passwords, but on top of that, did they implement 2-factor to make sure that doesn't happen again? There's other options. You can go in there to revoke all sessions where someone's already logged in. It kicks them out so they can't continue that session that they're in if some cookie's been used or whatever. And then did they check for any forwarding rules or filtering rules in place where even if the bad guy is now locked out, are these rules still in place that is allowing any incoming emails to be forwarded to the malicious actors to some account that he still has control to? And that's what I can think of off the top of my head.
So yes, there's probably more to think about in that besides that. Kim, a question for you. I think there's a lot of businesses that are hearing about cybersecurity insurance probably for the first time. How common is this, especially for small businesses? And is this something that every business should be looking at and talking to their insurance providers about? Or is this something that maybe some can go without?
Yes, they should be considering it. Cyber insurance made its entry into the marketplace, I think, about 7 or 8 years ago. And we probably sold very little of it back then. The uptick in clients taking the offerings we're putting in front of them is almost every time. So if you're not being presented with an option, you should be asking for an option. Again, you should be asking for a standalone cyber insurance product rather than an addendum to your business owner's policy. Although that's better than nothing, it's still not the best, because you really want to see if there's any cyber extortion coverage in those addendums. Most oftentimes there isn't, and you really need the full cyber product to do that job, as well as the business income component. Those are the 2 biggies that you're missing when you're just buying it as an addendum to your business owner's policy. Your minimum premium, it varies. I would say most carriers are around $2,000 a year for cyber insurance, although you can get some cheaper products. And it really just depends what industry you're in and what protections you have in place as to what that dollar amount can look like.
And as you said, the more protections you have in place, the cheaper it's going to be.
Exactly. And, you know, they base the rating on different components. Revenue is one of them. Number of records can be part of that, depending if you're dealing with any PII, private information, which, keep in mind, employee data is private information, right? A W-2 has a lot of really good stuff on it. So that would be it. And if there's any private health information. So it really becomes a nuanced discussion that everyone should be having. And it's hard to broad brush and give, you know, generalities, but be talking about it, be asking about it. And the application process in and of itself can be an eye-opening experience.
Kyle, from a business perspective, for those small businesses that probably don't have an IT guy on staff, maybe the family business, maybe they're not the most tech savvy. What is your advice for them to get started? They're looking at this going, oh, there's so much here and I don't even know where to start. What would your advice for that company be?
Well, if they've got somebody who's really technically minded, you could possibly start there. Maybe somebody in the family who has got some experience from a technical. I would not shy away from reaching out to some vendors. There's plenty of them in our marketplace that can help in assess, what it is that you need help with and provide some of those services. I think there's just a number of different things. But again, if you look at my list, if you go back and review this, you'll see that, you can take each and every one of those one by one and just say, okay, what's this whole multi-factor authentication thing? And how do I invoke that within my environment? I mean, there's so many applications now that will ask you if you want to turn that on. So my advice to you would be to take the steps to actually turn it on and enable it. Some people just haven't done that. So, that's a great place to start. Every individual can go into their own computer under the security settings and turn on that you want to have your system automatically update. You can do that on your mobile devices as well as your computers, and make sure that you're getting those Microsoft and Apple and Google Android type updates on a regular basis as they become available. So turn automatic updates on and make sure that that's happening. All those are things that you can either, Google and ask how to do, just do the search, or, find a family member who's comfortable with helping you with those searches and doing some of those things. So I hopefully that's helpful. There's so much information on the internet, YouTubes that can walk you through a lot of stuff. And if you have somebody with a little bit more of a technology background, they can definitely help walk through that.
Matt, I had a question. You said that if they email the MC3 email, they can be added to a distribution list?
Yes, that is correct. Our distribution list, which shares out anytime we create a new product, something on ransomware or password security or whatever one of the latest trends are. We also share out a product twice a month called Cyber News, kind of just the latest and greatest cyber news, what's happening out there in the cyber world. We also share out or push out information that we receive from our federal partners. For example, there's been a whole lot of cyber intelligence coming in reference to the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Therefore, we take that and we share it out to people on our distribution list so they can use that to better protect their network.
Great, thank you. Well, I want to thank all three of you for helping us out here. This is one of our Trust Lab speaker series. Thank you in large part to our Trust Lab sponsors, including BHS and Mercantile Bank of Michigan. Looks like Kyle has one more thing he'd like to add here.
Yeah, one last parting comment from me, and Matt kind of triggered this in my mind that I didn't say, and so contact in certain situations the individuals, the legal and all that kind of stuff, as Matt had said. But if it has something to do with payment processing and you realize that maybe you sent money somewhere that you shouldn't have, as soon as you hear figure that out, contact your financial institution, because depending on the timing of when you figured it out from when you did it, they can sometimes get those funds stopped in return. Obviously, no guarantee once it goes out the door, but the time is of the essence. So make sure that you have that on the top of your list too. If you see anything off, whether you're reviewing your account statement or looking at transactions on the line, or it just comes to your attention that you did something you shouldn't have, make sure you contact your financial institution right away.
Fantastic advice. Thank you again to everybody, to Kim and Kyle and Matt, and those that have helped us put this together. Hopefully it's been informative. We will have the video of this online and share it out to everybody that was in attendance and those who couldn't make it today. Thank you again for joining us. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Better Business Bureau. We're happy to help in any way we can and get you in touch with the experts that we have with our network of accredited businesses. So thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.